Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I am your host, Dr. Lesley Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. And today we are going to talk about Rikers Island. I don't know if you're familiar with Rikers Island. Rikers Island is well known, especially in America and in the eastern part of America, as a very notorious, very difficult jail in New York City, near New York City. It's a huge complex. It houses thousands of people, and it is known, unfortunately, for its violence and for its isolation, and also for the communities that find themselves at Rikers Island. Many of them Black and brown, many of them low income, many of them just forgotten by our society and by our systems. And so, as we talk about Rikers Island, I want you to have a different picture of Rikers Island in your mind, not the big jail complex full of incarcerated individuals, but a different vision where there's sustainability coming from Rikers Island, where there's economic growth and development, where there is things happening that contribute and add value to New York and to our country versus just a place where you can house and imprison people waiting for their time in court. And so there is a bill moving through New York City, Intro 881, which proposes to develop a master plan to turn Rikers Island into renewable Rikers with wastewater treatment, with renewable energy, with things that communities can use and benefit from, as opposed to being this blight on the city. And so to talk us through that, I am excited to have two amazing guests with me. One, Manuel, what is your title?
Well, my name is Manuel Figueroa. I'm a member of Freedom Agenda and also a justice impacted individual, which I advocate for. And yeah, so my title, I'm co-founder of Luxion Renewable Group, and that's we do utility scale solar.
There we go. See, I was missing that important piece. And along with Manuel, we have Michael Higgins Jr. What's your title?
Yeah, thank you for having us, Dr. Joseph. So my name is Michael Higgins Jr. I am the land use planner here at the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. We call ourselves NEJA. And I'm also the coordinator of the Renewable Rikers Coalition.
Nice. Thank you. And thank you so much for both of you being here. I really appreciate it. Our listeners are going to really benefit from this conversation. And so to start us off, Manuel, I want you to kind of set the stage for us. You mentioned earlier you're a justice impacted individual. I imagine you have some experience with Rikers Island. Could you share with us, just from your perspective, what your experience is with Rikers Island? Can you give us a picture of what life is like there, the conditions, the isolation, all the things that we wonder about on the outside looking in? What can you share with us about that?
Yes, I could definitely talk to that question because I have lived experience. My first time entering the system was 87, like 40 years ago. And it's worth noting that nothing has changed. Actually, it's gotten worse. And my last time there was 2018. And that's when I could bear witness that nothing has changed. It's gotten much worse.
When you say worse, like what's getting worse? What's happening there that's not improving in your view?
Well, back then they had dorms, and dorms are basically built on top of a 1/4-inch plywood, and it's holding by cinder blocks or whatever imploded areas of that dorm. You basically about 3 feet from the ground, and the smell, the odor from the toxicity of that landfill is real. And yeah, so that's the dorm setting. And I could also speak about the isolation and a special housing unit for 24 hours a day. and how hot is in there. So the cost, the human cost is major. And then for your family and your loved ones, that plays a big cost. But in there is you always have to be on your fight or flight mode.
Mm.
You know, the correction officers, they turn a blind eye. They leave it to the house gang. They call it house gang, and basically the house gang that runs, these dorms and settings is a group of gangs. So yeah, everything is just turned a blind eye. I've gotten cut on my neck, on my back, my head. For my commissary, that's something that is an ongoing thing there. Fight for people's basic stuff that they have under their bed. Well, there's no oversight, and that's the most frightening. And then you're so far away from your family, and it is built like a prison. I mean, like a prison, and this is just a jail. It's supposed to be like you being detained there to you await trial. Basically, people are there innocent as well, and they're going through the same trauma and abuse. But the human cost, I would definitely say, it's with the individual and the families and the children. They spend a $500,000 to keep one individual there, and we rarely have any kind of healing or any kind of programs that can offer a successful reentry. Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of neglect.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. It sounds like a horrible place and a dangerous place, which is surprising the way you describe it. If the idea is that you are awaiting a court date or you're kind of moving from one part of the system to another and you find yourself at Rikers Island, it feels like it's not just this idea, which I think I have in my mind, of, the hardest, most violent criminals are being placed on this island away from us to help us stay safe, on the mainland, when what you're describing sounds like this very transient, very short-term type of detainment that can turn violent, it could be deadly, and the conditions themselves don't lend itself to any kind of support for the people that are being detained there as they're awaiting the next step in the process. So, Michael, can you tell us more about how this island is set up? Like, what's there on the island? I mean, I'm thinking, okay, there's places where they're detaining people. Is that what the whole island is? Just more and more housing for detained individuals?
And thanks for that question, Dr. Joseph. The easy answer is yes. So Rikers Island is smack dab in the middle of the East River. It's between Queens and the Bronx. If your listeners have ever flown in and out of LaGuardia, you've flown next to Rikers Island. I think Rikers Island is about 500 feet from one of the runways to LaGuardia Airport. And so it is a decent sized island. It's about a little over 400 acres. Um, the vast majority is taken up by facilities. There's obviously parking lots, there's different checkpoints, but it's very much the center for incarceration for the city. That's what it's been known for almost a century. And again, here at the Renewable Rikers Coalition, we want to change that.
Yeah, yeah. And just for clarification for me, is Rikers Island the place where everyone in New York City who, you have your initial kind of arrest and date, and then when you're awaiting sentencing or awaiting some kind of pre-trial stuff, does everybody go to Rikers Island first before they figure out what ends up with their case and their situation? Or are there other jails around the city and you just were unfortunate to land at Rikers Island?
Yes, they had one in the Tombs where I'm from in Lower Manhattan, and they would call it Tombs. That was Center Street, and they also have one in Brooklyn. So yeah, you could have went to your borough-based jail,
Hmm.
but those jails have now closed, and so yeah, you have a one-way ticket to Rikers Island.
And I'll say
Wow.
that one-way ticket is really for folks who can't afford the bail. So again, I think it's important to note that, Rikers Island is a jail. These are people who are waiting for their day in court. But we do have a system where, unfortunately, the poorest of folks who find themselves um, caught up in our incarceration system, they have to spend time on Rikers Island before they actually get to prove their innocence.
That's a good point. I failed to mention that. I mean, it's not a criminal justice podcast, but obviously it all intersects and issues with bail. I know there's been a lot of discussions about bail reform, a lot of ways to make the system not just, but just equitable for anybody who enters into it, because obviously the richer you are, the more access you have to representation, bail. I imagine you could even find yourself detained in other ways that wouldn't require you going to Rikers Island. But for everyone else, the moment you step into that courtroom and they say, we'll set the bail at this number and your next hearing is at this date, Manuel said you're going straight to Rikers Island. And there's no way around it. And you might not make it back. And that's a really scary proposition for someone who's detained on some misdemeanor charge, or someone who was caught up in the wrong situation, or who truly is completely innocent and misidentified or just profiled in a different way. So it's a scary stuff. Now, I remember, this might have been before the pandemic, where New York said they were going to close Rikers Island, right? They had the bill. I think they went through the process of legislation and signing a bill to close Rikers Island. I think it was 2019. That's what I have written down. But it obviously hasn't happened. So, Michael, why is it not closed? Even if it's not renovated and made into a nice renewable area, why not close it and then we do what we need to do to make it a better place to use?
Yeah, so let me give you and your listeners a little bit more context of what led to that moment in 2019.
Okay.
So here in New York City, Rikers Island has had a violence problem for a long time. I'm sure many is quite familiar with that violence problem. Violence mostly against detainees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so because of that violence problem and some particular work from inside, um, Rikers Island has been under a consent decree around the issues of violence. So there's been a longstanding court case called the Nunez case, which was basically around a group of detainees on Rikers who were impacted by this violence issue. And basically, they said, look, our civil rights are being violated by this issue of violence and the lack of accountability and oversight around the conditions that detainees have to live with on Rikers Island. And because of that case, the city has basically been under federal oversight to deal with this issue now since the better part of a decade and a half. And so that started back in 2012. Um, Based off of some of that work, and particularly the deaths of folks that were behind bars, maybe most notably someone named Malik Browder, who is a young person who, found himself caught up on Rikers Island for 3 years, and then was basically released. There was never really much case against him, but he had to stay, and his case was basically, pushed out of trial over and over again. So, he would go to court. That the court case says, okay, you need to come back in another 3 weeks. That happened about 30 times.
Wow.
And so, he gets off Rikers, tries to rebuild his life. Unfortunately, commits suicide in 2015. So, after the death of Malik Browder, really we saw a lot of uh, movement around what we call the campaign to close Rikers, which
Mhm.
really kind of starts really picking up steam 2016. And so 2017, the then mayor, Bill de Blasio, comes out just saying, look, we're going to close Rikers within this 10-year time frame. And between that time and 2019 is really the development of kind of an alternative plan, which we know as the Burr-based jail plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that Instead of having the facilities on Rikers Island, there would be new facilities in the boroughs. So there'd be 4 new facilities in every borough except for Staten Island. That again, instead of everyone being on the island, isolated, out of view, out of sight, and having to take a bus into whatever borough you were arrested in be on trial. You'd be in a borough nearby a courthouse where again you can go back and forth. You can get you have legal counsel. You can easily talk to that person. If you have family members, they can easily visit you. And so that vision was passed in 2019. But there's some things that have happened since then, and maybe most notably is the election of former Mayor Eric Adams. And so when Mayor Adams was first campaigning to be mayor back in 2021, he was somewhat supportive of the vision for the closure of the jails in Rikers Island. But when he actually took office in 2022, he showed himself to be a very deep opponent. And so during his tenure as mayor, we saw numbers rise. So recognizing that he took office, uh, right after really the lifting of the pandemic here in the city. Saw numbers of people on the island rise very quickly. So during the pandemic, the numbers got down to about 4,000, maybe 4,500 detainees. During his time, that went up to 7,000. We also saw, conversations about the use of the island to house ICE, have facility for ICE,
Really?
and to have folks there would be detained by ICE to be held on Rikers Island. And so a lot of his key policy initiatives were to really weaponize and reduce incarceration in a number of different assets, not just about, again, um, just folks being caught up in the system, but also, again, working together with ICE. I think really using incarceration and sweeps against homeless people. So instead of trying to say, okay, how are we pushing, these folks into shelter, whether those are hotels, particularly, in those first couple years after the pandemic, moving those out of the hotels and into Rikers Island.
I would like to say something, Dr. Lesley.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Joseph. I was in boots on the ground, right? Because I remember 2019 when they were releasing a lot of people from Rikers Island, and they had the plan, and I had to recreate myself for COVID, so I got into case managing and working in these hotels where the detainees were being released into these hotels. So we pretty much had some traction, and then Eric Adams came in. And those same very people that we had in hotels that we were, we had a great system. We had workforce, we had counseling, we had, housing. We was working really good, and it was really successful. But then Eric Adams shut the whole program down. So now I had to go to all my clients, the participants that in them hotels. I had to go to them. I was like, I don't know where you have to go. I don't know where you're gonna go, but you gotta leave here, and I could give you a one-way ticket to a shelter, which was Bellevue, or that was like the intake shelter. So and then it was making room for the migrants. So we scratched that off, and then we filled those very hotels with migrants. And I believe people are familiar with, the fluctuation of that. And that was how we got put in the back burner. And so we got some traction now. Hopefully we will, resume.
And so then when Mayor Adams moved away from the vision, it sounded like he ramped up the ways in which he would use Rikers to achieve a bunch of other objectives that Rikers was never even intended for to begin with, and makes it almost impossible to actually shut it down if you're continuing to expand its operation and continue to expand its scope when it comes to the use of the island. But Adams is not there. He is gone. And I think personally, this is me personally, I think New York is better for that he is no longer the mayor. We have a new mayor there who I imagine has a different vision for what to do moving forward. And so now we have this bill called Renewable Rikers, which I imagine is different than whatever was passed to quote unquote close Rikers. So this bill seems to present a very particular way in which we should utilize the space on Rikers Island to make it renewable, to kind of contribute to society. Can you tell us what the legislation, what this bill actually accomplishes or what it seeks to accomplish and how it functions on the ground if it were to be passed and agreed to and funded properly?
Yeah. So it might be helpful for you and your audience, Dr. Joseph. So we, as a coalition, the Renewable Rikers Coalition, we passed a bill a few years ago. It's called the Renewable Rikers Act.
Okay.
And so that is kind of the step before the bill that we're seeking to pass right now. So, as we mentioned, this vision for the closure of the jails and the borough-based, jails plan that passed in 2019. And then in the meantime, there's this question of like, okay, if the jails on Rikers closes, what do we use the island? And so in the past, there's been a number of different ideas for the island. Some were more reasonable than others. So the island has been looked at previously um, as a place to extend the runways for LaGuardia. There's been some, floating ideas or some wacky ideas for housing. You don't want to put housing on Rikers Island for a number of different reasons. Uh, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this bill, the Renewable Rikers Act, it did a few different things.
Mhm.
One is that it essentially made incarceration as a use for the island illegal. So it says, okay, you have this period of time. So you have between now when the bill passed in 2027, which is when it's like the period where the jails are supposed to be closed, to have this as the place for the jails. After that, you can't use it for incarceration. Instead, this is going to be land that's going to be used for sustainable purposes. So, um, for us as part of the coalition, we've been thinking a lot about what that looks like. That in a way that one recognizes where Rikers is as like an island that's encircled by a lot of pollution and polluting infrastructure.
Mhm.
And also, how can we use this to the benefit of the city as a whole? And so, the when we as a coalition say sustainable uses, for us that is renewable energy. Just recognizing that again, we are living in this moment where gas is expensive. Heating your home is expensive. Keeping it cool during the summer is expensive. How can we use this as a way to generate power for use that can benefit everyday New Yorkers? And then the second is wastewater treatment, which again is an issue here in New York City. We are an old city. Our sewer systems are about a century and a half old, unlike other parts of the city or other parts of the country where you have rain that comes out of the sky, and then the water that people use every day, whether you're flushing your toilet or you take a shower or you wash your dishes, all that goes into the same sewer system here in New York City.
Mhm.
And so you uh, need those facilities to treat that water and then also to release it um, back into our rivershed in a way that doesn't harm the environment. Unfortunately, at this point, New York City has been out of compliance of the Clean Water Act for over 30 years. And so this plant would get us closer to being in compliance.
I didn't realize that. Um, so it sounds like this island, once we can get incarceration off the table, which it currently is supposed to be at the moment because that Renewable Rikers bill passed, and start thinking about how to reimagine Rikers Island, it could bring a lot of benefit to the city. Manuel, when you think about the idea of repurposing Rikers Island, and because you're on the ground, you talk to the people in the community, people who were impacted by the carceral system in New York City. How does the idea of this kind of sustainability, environmental focused approach to changing Rikers Island's use land on the people that you work with and people that you encounter each and every day when you talk about this issue?
No, that is it is true. At first, the community really does not see the connection on any, when if I speak about renewable Rikers and turning that into a renewable energy place. But through my work as Renewable Energy 101 that I do in a community-based program, and through the coalition and people that join that coalition, which is uh Renewable Rikers and or Freedom Agenda and or Campaign to Close Rikers. Through there, we give information for the broader community, and then it becomes full circle as we make sense of how we live in a polluted environment, just living close to adjacent to Rikers, and as Mike was saying with the water management. So yeah, just to be educated and inform people. So we talk about on the borough-based jails, and once someone really is receptive and really willing to understand the benefits, that they would concur.
Okay, so there's a lot of education that goes into sharing and showing the connection and bringing them on board
Yeah.
with this particular vision of what Rikers could be. Do you want to add something, Mike?
Yeah, I just realizing that again, I didn't actually talk about the current legislation that we're trying to get passed right now. So Renewable Rikers is kind of the first step. The current legislation we call the Master Planning Bill, or the Renewable Rikers Master Planning Bill, and it requires the city to say, okay, this is the future for Rikers Island, right? This future is where the jails are closed. We're moving forward to this vision for renewable energy, for wastewater treatment. We're also hopefully to have hope to have composting as something to have on the island as well. And so, this bill requires the city to make a master plan for what that looks like, and it's some timelines. Okay, like when we want this done, and also starts thinking about the money, which I think is like the white elephant in the room, because this all this requires money, and so we want to make sure that we are setting the city on this path, that it won't be pulled back to this path of incarceration. So for us, it's important that we have a new mayor in office right now, who I think is generally supportive of this vision for Rikers Island. But we also recognize that this vision will take many mayors after them in order to really get to the finish line.
Yeah. This is not going to happen overnight at all. And so it's good to have the legislation, though, that's in place that at least frames the way that things are going to move forward, even if succeeding mayors kind of waffle on the details. But this is where we're going. This is where we're headed. Manuel, when you think about this vision and the way that you work with communities, I do wonder what kind of input on the ground local community members have had in the vision, because I can imagine a world where there's a group of people who would just say, hey, just shut this place down. We don't want it here anymore. And in their minds, they might not even think past that. Just shut it down, do something else with this island. We don't want this to be a part of our story. But then on the other hand, I imagine community members will also want to say, hey, let's turn it into this. Let's use it for this purpose. We could use more of blank. Can we have this island contribute to that concern that we have? And so when you talk to community members, when you talk to leaders on the ground, how much of what Renewable Rikers was from their input, and how much of what Renewable Rikers could become would benefit them in the end in terms of the way it will be utilized and put forward?
Well, I'm aligned with, getting people on board with workforce development. I'm aligned with informing communities about renewable. But I believe that, to have a healthier community and to have, and to have resiliency. Resiliency starts with the person, but you got to address the environment, and that's what I champion for. There isn't one without the other. I work along with my fiance's nonprofit, Lower Side Foundry, and it's basically a healing initiative. So she does her health and wellness one-on-one workshop, and her curriculum it's for those who's trying to recover and trying to really get in touch with their feelings and stuff. And I personally do renewable energy one-on-one curriculum, and for justice impacted individuals from 16 to 25 at Brownsville. So, they are like really, getting to understand, what the workforce looks like with NYCHA, on New York City housing and how we retrofitting stuff. But in my advocacy, I always stay focused, educating and really bringing to light that, Rikers been a place of harm and injustice. And I feel like if it was to be for renewable energy and for healing, it goes together perfectly. And so that's my drive and that's my mission.
Yeah, no, that's great. Go ahead, Mike.
So, NYCHA, New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, is a network of different groups around the city that come together around these environmental justice issues. And one of our members, the Point CDC, shout out to the Point. They're based in Hunts Point, the Bronx, so they're just north of Rikers Island. And they have been one of the champions of what we call the green transition. Like, how are we moving our economy from fossil fuels to renewable energy, sustainable purposes that are just healthy for the environment, but also a new economy that folks can really play a role and make living wages. So their work in Hunts Point is really connected to Renewable Rikers, and that our hope is that while we are putting new infrastructure on the island, we can close facilities that are in folks' backyards right now.
Mhm.
Here in New York City, we have issue around peaker plants, or what we call peaker plants. So peaker plants are basically plants that cut on, like on a hot day like today, when the grid is really kind of needs that little bit of oomph to make sure it doesn't shut down completely. And so those plants, they're very toxic. They emit nitric oxide, sulfur oxides, things in the air that you don't want to be breathing. And
Mhm.
so, our vision would be to close uh, a number of different peaker plants that are along the waterfront in the South Bronx and also in Queens, and that we can hopefully replace that energy with renewables on the island, but also make connections to offshore wind projects in the near future. So, um, they've been really shaping the conversation, because this is not just about, oh, we want renewables just to have renewables. We want renewables because we can then close down these things that are poisoning our and are killing, are slowly killing a lot of our neighbors. So, um, from that perspective, it's about really investing in a future where we can breathe and thrive. And so that is something that's really important for us as a coalition.
Yeah, I would like to also say something about that. Um, and so our community, I feel like it should always be let's develop something. Let's speak to this rather than letting them speak to it. Because if we
Mhm.
don't have these justice impacted individuals, these people that have been harmed by the justice system. And we don't have these people advocating and forming a plan of what we want to see. We don't have anything. So communication is key, and that's what I reach out in my advocacy for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, these kinds of big initiatives, big campaigns, I believe have to be fueled by communities that were directly impacted by this island, by these industries, by these systems that are harming them. I think that's when you get the best result and the most comprehensive solution to the problem is when you bring in all the people who have been impacted and who understand very intimately the harm that was inflicted by that system, by this island, by the way that things currently operate in the city. And so I completely agree that that has to be a major focus and a major component of how things happen moving forward. And speaking of moving forward, so right now, if I understand correctly, 2019, we have the bill to close Rikers. Later, we have a Renewable Rikers Act that's passed to present this vision. And now we have a bill, 881, to advance, I guess, the previous act by developing true plans and a process to bring that vision to life. And so, what's the trajectory? What's the path? Like, does this bill need to be passed first? Is it already passed? Are there major opponents to this bill? Is it going to be a hard lift to kind of get it over the hump and get it through the legislature to be agreed upon? And then when that happens, what's the timeline, at least in the minds of the people drafting legislation, for this to actually take place, like to begin to move?
Yeah. So that's the question, right? So right now we are trying to get the master plan bill passed. Um, but there's some things that were laid out in the Renewable Rikers Act that the city was supposed to do during the Adams administration didn't do that we're trying to get back on track. For example, um, one of the things that the Renewable Rikers Act laid out is a process where over time the Department of Correction would slowly remove pieces of the island out of their control. So they would transfer facilities that weren't being used or pieces of land that weren't being used um, from Department of Correction to Department of Citywide Administrative Services, or we call it DCAS, that manages the city's real estate portfolio. And so that didn't happen during the Abbott administration. So um, the plan or the process as it was designed back in 2021 is that the city would analyze the potential to transfer land every 6 months.
Hmm.
So the mayor, de Blasio, on his way out of office, he did the first transfer. That was December 2021. Adams takes office 2022. No transfers between 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. So now we're in 2026. We're 4 years behind.
Yeah.
We're looking for that land to be transferred because obviously we can't do anything. We can't start planning. We can't really start saying, okay, like what small things we can do now without really that access to land. The bill would clarify what exactly is going to be coming on the island and where it would go and how much it costs. And, again, it would also free up a lot of capital money to do that work. And so as a part of the Renewable Rikers Act, the city was required to basically develop feasibility studies on the potential for a new wastewater facility, potential for renewable energy. Like, are these things possible? And those studies did say that they were possible. They came out in 2024. But as we wait, with most things, when you wait, usually things become more expensive.
Yeah.
So, when the feasibility study for the wastewater treatment plant, which I think is like the biggest, going to be the biggest piece of infrastructure that's part of the Renewable Rikers vision, when that feasibility study came out, The study put a price tag on the new facility at $34 billion. And so that's a lot of money. It's going to be a multi-year commitment. And so we're trying to get certain stuff locked in so that number doesn't, sky.
I also want to say the delay is sometimes out of sight, out of mind. No one is talking about it, so no one's thinking about it. And with that delay, you're trying to normalize the situation again, where we accepting the same thing, the same status quo. So for us to continue this, it's very important, to keep it up and close and right in their face.
Yeah, to make sure it's on people's minds all the time and that they consistently see the need to have this place closed. So, in your view, I'll start with you, Manuel. In your view, what could sink this effort? What could happen that would all of a sudden take this vision off the table? And then we just go back, like you said, the status quo. We're sending people up there. We're just filling the beds back up, and we're back to, Mayor Adams level usage.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear, and that's the biggest just what you just said, make normalizing things all over where, I believe a lot of people have a built-in forgetter, and, we forget the struggle. We forget that we was on that island suffering just as well as the next person. Yeah, as long as we continue to forget, we're doomed to repeat. And, through this drive and this mission and we keep it real. We keep it like, yo, this is a real thing. And, we'll always do that. But yeah, my fear is for it to be put in the back burner and not addressed.
Yeah. I mean, I get worried too because there's so much happening in the world. There's so many things vying for our attention, pulling us away. So many different initiatives and campaigns all across, I'm sure in New York, definitely across the country, wars and high prices and other kind of issues. We have midterm elections coming up. It makes me concerned that something so important could kind of get lost in all these discussions. Michael, from a legislative perspective, what are your thoughts about the support that this bill has, its ability to get passed? Are you concerned at all that it wouldn't? Are there certain potential hangups that might even delay the ability to get it passed, and other kind of issues that you think might trip up this campaign that you've been on for, at least a decade now?
Yeah. I think in terms of the bill, I think there's some support. I think unfortunately, um, there's just not a lot of folks that are terribly familiar with Renewable Rikers. I think folks are much more familiar with the closed Rikers side of it, and where we at the Renewable Rikers Coalition are clear that we can't get to Renewable Rikers without closing.
Right.
So a lot of folks have been just focused on that side. That and to be perfectly honest, I think the Adams administration really buried a lot of these commitments that I've been talking about that the city was supposed to do. So again, we were supposed to study the feasibility, the potential to have a wastewater treatment plant and renewable energy. Those studies came out to little fanfare. It's not like this the mayor was saying, hey, like look at this potential benefit for the city and for EJ communities around Rikers Island. Also, as part of the Renewable Rikers Act, there was the creation of this advisory committee that would shape this process for the city and be basically a thought partner in terms of like, okay, you can be looking at these facilities are not being used, you should transfer those. We could potentially move some stuff around so that we can get access to this island. We could try this small project and see where that goes, and that can hopefully build into the greater vision. And so that committee was really kind of silenced during the Adams administration. And so for me, just recognizing that the mayor has a lot of power in this, and that's part of the reason why these bills are important, because they actually say like, look, this is the law, you have to follow it. But I do worry that just like this year, Mamdani came to office this past January and was basically told like, hey, like you have a $12 billion deficit you need to figure out. And I'm worried that the price tag for this vision for Renewable Rikers might be something that ultimately means that the vision is slowly cut and slowly shrunk to something that's not really the full uh, vision that I think has the best benefit for the buck. I also worry that, again, that, I, at least to some degree, there's certain people that connect renewable Rikers to the jails, and because they don't want the jails to close, they don't, if the jails don't close, we can't do anything on the island. So,
Mhm.
um, there is movement on the Burbank jail, so they are either all in uh finalizing design or in construction right now. Originally, again, the goal was for the jails to be finished, or the jails are supposed to be on Rikers were supposed to be closed by 2027. We're not going to hit that 2027. It's going to be closer to 2032, 2033. And so again, time is money.
Yeah.
As like, things start to drift, often, you know, support, political will often wanes. And so the sooner we can really get these things done, like the Burbage jails done, the jails on Rikers Island demolished, the better.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I just thought about this. I should have asked you earlier. Are there competing visions for this island? Because well, not maybe it's not obvious, but I would imagine that a lot of people would want Rikers Island closed and shut down. But I also would imagine that maybe this idea of renewable and sustainability might not catch on. And I would imagine that there would be other actors who might have their own ideas of what we could use this land for. And I'm thinking, of course, we're in America, it's very capitalistic. So, how can we make money off this land? How can we transform this land into something that really generates income? And I would imagine in a world where affordability is the top, concern for a lot of people, that this idea of generating income, generating economic activity might be compelling to some people. And then this Rikers Island could just be a conduit for that. And so have you or either of you heard or been having to push back against other visions that people would have for the island?
I worked last year with Con Ed. It's a local utility company, and they sponsored us to offset their power plant. And how we did that was through a community virtual power plant in the Lower East Side. And Lower East Side is from 1 to 14. They're on 14th Street. So I see the urgency. I see also that the infrastructure cannot hold what's coming, and especially through like what Mike said, through these heat and with these data centers, and it's straining their infrastructure. And for them to say that they need assistance in this way to allow us to model that, it speaks that in the future that perhaps that people like local utility companies would say, yeah, we need something more than what we're getting from the Hudson Valley, which is basically upstate,
Mhm.
and we need something for the city. That's my hope of
Yeah.
urgency.
Yeah. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah. I think I mentioned that there was this vision that was floating when Cuomo was governor to extend the runways
Hmm.
for LaGuardia. I think that's been really like the most consistent thing that I've heard in the last few years. Um, but again, I have to restate it. Rikers Island is a literal dump. It is literally an island that the city has owned since the 1880s that has grown because of landfill. So it's been the place where the city sent trash and things that it didn't want to deal with. And that is the basis for Rikers Island today. So again, I mentioned earlier that Rikers Island today is 413 acres.
Oh,
It was 90 acres when they first bought it back in the 1880s. So it's quadrupled in size because of landfill. So again, you have to deal with decomposition. So there's methane that's just being released into the atmosphere. It's not a place where people want to live. And honestly, I don't think it's a place where people should be really staying in any major capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, land is extremely valuable here in New York City, and there's no empty land really out there to be
Right.
sitting to be repurposed for whatever use. So again, we're clear that Renewable Rikers is the best future for Rikers Island, but you know, I think we know that we'll have to constantly resell this vision to the city, and that again we have to box other interests out, and that's all the reason
Yep.
why we have to have this master planning bill passed, like this vision for the master plan to move forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And thinking about it with an environmental justice framework or lens, I mean, it's not just New York, obviously. Prisons and jails all across the country are built either on top of landfills, way out far away from everybody else, and just completely neglected and abandoned areas, old mines, really places that you wouldn't want to put anything. This is where you would bring these individuals and house them there. And so it is not a secret in the environmental justice world that these prisons, these jails are a blight and a drain, and they're not even helpful in dealing with the issue that we're trying to address with them. And so let me ask you this, Manuel, if 2023, no, 2033 comes and we have our borough-based jails and we shut down Rikers Island, make it a renewable place where we can give back to the city instead of taking from it. Does that help deal with some of these prison and jail issues across the country? Can it become a model for how people think about incarceration and environmental justice and community development and engagement? Like, what are your thoughts about that? Can this be a blueprint moving forward?
Yes, I believe it is being done because we're not unique in having really messed up jails. I believe everywhere they have that problem because this is more than just one. This I believe it cultivate this thing of correction officers. They just stay together and they hide and no oversight and they just continue to abuse and that happens everywhere. But what I strongly recommend and what we're doing, and I'm sure that it's not unique as well, and to advocate to confront, challenge, and change the status quo. Our power through numbers and our activism, speaks volumes, and we should hold these people accountable. And I feel like if we could address that core problem and having oversight and then holding them accountable and dehumanizing people and having a more ethical way of treating people, then that could be definitely modeled, and I hope and pray that can be.
Yeah. And Michael, what if it's 2040 and I invite you on to the program to continue to talk about the effort to close Rikers? What do you think that would say? Would that signal to the rest of us that, you know what, this approach, would it be the way to go? Or do you see, no, we need to keep fighting for it. It's going to take longer than we thought maybe, but we got to keep going? Because I know, like, a lot of us look to New York City. I mean, it's a big city. It's a fun city. The Knicks just won. It's like, man, I want to go there. I want to go to Manhattan. I want to go all these artists, Broadway. It's the city that we all love. And we believe that anything can happen in that city and it becomes like a shining light to the rest of us. But if this doesn't happen, I mean, we might get really discouraged about what could be possible
Yeah.
in this arena of prison, jail reform, bail reform, renewable repurposing of facilities. Like, what would that say to us? What would you be thinking in that scenario?
Yeah. Um, it would say that, again, looking back at 2026, we didn't have the champions and advocates we thought we did, and we needed more power. Um, again, like we're sitting, hindsight is 2020, but
Hmm.
as we sit here in 2026, um, we have a new uh, Department of Correction commissioner who was formerly incarcerated, and
Mm.
Commissioner um, Stanley Richards, someone who was, you know, very familiar with the campaign to close Rikers, someone who was, familiar with the campaign, the Renewable Rikers campaign. We have what we call a closed Rikers czar. So literally, like we have a new position in the current admin whose job is to make sure that the jail is closed. Um, it would mean if in 2040, we're still talking about closed Rikers. It means that a lot of things fell through. It could be a few different things. Like there's no shortage of forces that are just invested in incarceration as like from a
That's
very
true.
punitive punishment perspective. It could mean that, again, we waited too long and the numbers got funny and we just didn't have the money or we couldn't get the political will to designate that money to make things happen. It could also mean that again that maybe the general public eh, turns sour and they're invested in this vision of Rikers Island as it is. But I say all that to say that you don't stop. You reassess. You take a minute. Okay, we're losing. We're just after the finals again. The Knicks were down every game, and sometimes you got to say, okay, I'm down. Let's try some different things. Let's put some new folks on the floor with some energy, and you keep moving. And so again, we recognize that this vision will not happen um, if we're not doing the type of political education that Manny is doing. Just talk to folks
Hmm.
about why is renewable energy important, and again, it's not just important because we need energy. It's it's going to be a burgeoning um, sector of the economy that our people deserve to be on the ground floor for. Um, and just recognizing that again, we live in a city that's basically a bunch of islands, and so sea level rise and climate change, these are real things here in the city. So we have to be forward facing and we have to expect the challenges, but we need the leadership and we need a general public that's willing to make some different choices than they have in the past.
Yes. Yes. And that's a hypothetical question because we're not planning on being in that situation in 2040. We're shutting down Rikers Island and we're getting this
Yes.
renewable vision in place and we're going to make New York City a place where we continue to look to for hope and inspiration. And so we're running out of time. I really appreciate all the time you spent. With every interview, I always ask the guests to kind of leave the listeners with something they can take away. And so, when we think about Rikers, we think about renewable energy, we think about incarceration, justice impacted individuals. We talked about all these things on this episode. I'll start with Manny. Manny, what do you want the listeners, people who hear your voice right now, to walk away feeling, not just knowing we got the information,
Hmm.
but what do you want us to feel and what can a listener do to advance this campaign and to move in this direction of closing down Rikers?
Well, I would want the listeners to feel hope, hope and also urgency. It can be very well in your community in Virginia, Georgia. It could be, to get involved. And yeah, my thing is to get involved and in the injustice and the dehumanization of people that are suffering. We have our duty, to help. Um, yeah, I feel, you'll be blessed, for the work that you put in God's will. And I feel like, it should be, upfront, that you always help your brother and your sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael, same question. What do you want our listeners to walk away from feeling and knowing from this conversation? And what can we do? I know a lot of people listening will say, well, I don't live in New York. I don't have a way of influencing what's happening there. I'm not from New York either. So what would you want us to know? What do you want us to feel and think about as we end the episode and move into our daily lives?
Yeah, I think this issue of justice is something that anybody could really, I think seriously about, and like, what does justice look like for people, whether whatever they do. So, like, again, the folks that are sitting on Rikers Island, 85% of them haven't gotten their day in court. So, if we are in this place of you know thinking of America as this land of justice, then the processes that hopefully lead to that justice, they matter. So unfortunately, there are many folks on the island right now that aren't getting justice on a number of different fronts. They are waiting in horrible conditions. Uh, they are being often abused and being attacked um, for reasons that again, I think we can all say that these things aren't fair. And if we think that they're not fair, then we all should be doing something.
Mm,
So again, for us at the Renewable Rikers Coalition, we recognize that the same communities that a lot of these folks are coming from are the same communities that are, you know, breathing in polluted air, uh, that are, again, really the sacrifice zones of the city. These are the places where all the infrastructure that you don't want in your neighborhood, they land there.
Mhm.
So there has to be a new framework of justice that we think about all these things. When we think about incarceration, well, again, what does it mean to be American? Does that mean that I actually get my day in court? Okay, well then we need to make sure that happens. Does it mean that I get to breathe clean air and drink clean water? Okay, that we need infrastructure to make that happen. And so again, I would definitely, encourage folks to really think about what injustice looks like in your local context. There's a lot of organizing happening around incarceration. I just watched a film, The Alabama Solution, which again
mm,
looks at the issue
Yeah.
of incarcerated folk in Alabama, but those conditions and those challenges aren't rare here in this country. And so, um, I always tell folks to organize, join an organization. If you'd like to learn more about the work that me and Manny do, you can follow us, the campaign Close Rikers on social media, Renewable Rikers. We have an Instagram page. But the work continues, and we're always happy to talk to folks who want to learn more and figure out lessons that they can really try in their local context.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, with that, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me. I appreciate the conversation, the insight, the motivation, the passion behind this because it's really important. And I'm so thankful to be able to meet people on the ground, on the front line, advancing the cause of justice. And so thank you both for the work that you're doing and for the organizations that you are a part of and the work that they're doing as well. Continue to fight that fight for us.
Thank you,
yes.
and thank you for giving us this platform to talk more about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. You're welcome. And with that, we will end our episode of the Environmental Justice Lab, where we are for the people and for the planet. We will see you next time.